Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Ted Gardner, and I'm an interviewer with the Library of Congress Oral History Project, which is so capably handled here at our public library and our wonderful history department here. Dennis Dooley, historian, is the leader of our program, and he's also our videographer. And this morning we have the honor to meet and speak with Richard Dooley. And Colonel, it's just a wonderful thing to have you here and to get to know about you. And of course, as Dennis pointed out, you'll get a DVD of this interview for you and your family. Mm-hmm. Copy goes to the Library of Congress Archives in Washington, and a copy is kept here at our public library in Cincinnati. So you're not going to be able to hide forever, because you're going to be on the web and everything eventually. So tell me, I like to always start out with, where were you born?
I was born in Maysville, Kentucky, 70 miles up the river.
Right up the river.
And when I was about 1 year old, the family moved to Jackson, Tennessee.
Oh.
So I learned to talk down there, and we came back to Cincinnati when I was about 6 and starting.
Where did you go to elementary school?
Oh, I started Assumption School in Walnut Hills, then at St. X High, and then to Xavier University.
Oh, yeah.
But when I got back, people were anxious to hear me talk, and it didn't take me long to realize they didn't really care much what I said, but how I said it. But anyway, I learned to be a good Cincinnatian, I hope, and certainly honored to be here today.
Well, it's a great honor for us. And this program of oral history is so important, of course, because we're losing our World War II veterans at a rate of about 1,000 a day now. And 16.5 million people served in our armed forces during World War II, and now we're down to a little over 3 million. So it's important to get these stories. Now, what was your family like? Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had 3 brothers and a sister.
Wonderful.
And 3 of us were in the war.
Is that right? Is that right?
Mother, we were spread out around the world, North Africa, United States, and out in the westward.
Where were you? There are certain times in a person's life that you remember where you were and what happened. Where were you on Pearl Harbor Day, 1941? Do you remember that? When you got the news about what happened at Pearl Harbor?
I was living in Walnut Hills. I was getting ready to go to church on that Sunday morning. And a man was talking on the radio about Pearl Harbor and attack this and attack that. I wasn't paying much attention. My brother said, I think he's telling the truth. So then I buried my head in the receiver and listened to it all. And the next thing, got out and got downtown to see what was going on.
Right.
It was quite a shock, but I was in the Army. I was on ROTC duty as an instructor at Xavier University at the time.
Oh, you were?
So I was already in the Army, and I knew I'd be going. So that's what started it all.
Well, I should say, that's interesting that see, now you were born in 1917, so you finished high school about, 1935?
I graduated from high school 35.
35.
Went to Xavier, to the ROTC program.
Oh, you got right into ROTC at Xavier.
When it started, it was a sophomore when I started out there.
Wonderful.
And the class with first commission people had 3 years.
Right.
And so I was one of those. And little did I realize I was working on my life's work.
Of course not.
At the time I went in, the war was on and the war was it. That's what everybody worked on.
Right.
And it was after the war.
Where did you go for further training after graduation?
Well, before the war started, I went on active duty with the 19th Field Artillery at Fort Knox, the 5th Division, Army Division. And we made maneuvers down Mississippi and down Texas, Louisiana state line. We were the first major maneuvers the Army had had since World War I. Mm-hmm. And it was quite an experience. And when I came back from that, the PMS, the Army was replacing regular officers and ROTC leaders with the reserves who had experience. So I was told about Xavier, and they accepted me back there, and I taught there in 40 and 41 classes. But after 41, of course, I wasn't there long, and I was out and on my way.
That was in military science?
I'm sorry, what?
In military science, you taught?
Well, yeah. The war started in December, and by May, I was headed for Fort Bragg in wider spaces.
Now, when you got to Fort Bragg, then what was your assignment? What was your duty?
A lot of reserve officers were being called to active duty, and they gave them a couple of weeks there just to get their feet on the ground, get oriented on what was modern. And I taught the school there at that time.
Oh, you did? Now, this is Fort Bragg, North Carolina, or California?
North Carolina.
Okay, I see. Wonderful.
And then I got a call for 2 regular Army lieutenants of field artillery for parachute operations in cold and mountainous terrain. So I left there and went out to Montana and joined the 1st Special Service Force, which was part Canadian, part U.S.
Well, that's interesting.
Was a paratrooper there for a couple of months.
Right. So you had experience with the Canadians, huh?
Oh, yeah. The Canadian. My battalion commander was a Canadian. I was the exec. And we had 2 Canadians and 1 American that's commanding the companies we were in, and the soldiers were mixed. And the Canadians, of course, had been over in Europe preparing for the war for some time. They were in excellent physical condition.
Right.
And we had to match them. They did a good job. It was quite something learning a lot from them.
I should say. Well, you had a very, very important role then in training and leadership.
Well, through parachute training and mountain climbing. But then I took a tumble on a pair of skis, tore a knee up, and I left active at that time, put in reserve coming out of the hospital, and ended up with the 63rd Infantry Division.
Well,
With
you
that
know,
one, I went overseas.
speaking of skiing in those days was so different from what it is today, because you had the big long wooden skis.
We had long skis.
Remember those?
And
Yeah.
when I took a tumble, you don't roll very well with a ski on 7-foot of board on each foot.
That's right. That's right.
I'd never been on skis before. A lot of Canadians, of course, learn to ski about the time they walk.
That's right. Ski and play hockey. Well, so you took that training up in the Rockies?
Helena, Montana, up near Helena.
Oh my goodness, way up there. That is wonderful. Well, what an experience for a young fellow, as mature as you were, but still you hadn't been out
There were a
to...
lot of people learning new experiences at that time, and they
Right.
did it very willingly and the best they could, and I think that accounted for the outcome of the war later
Oh,
on.
absolutely, no question about it. Tell us about travel now. Was that by train? You're cross-country, back and forth?
Travel, I mean, in the Army?
Yes, in the Army,
Well,
here in this country.
I left up there, 63rd was training in Mississippi, and I stayed with them and went overseas with them
Okay.
and fought the war with them.
Where did you embark from the United States?
Well, we embarked from New York Harbor. We didn't know where we were going,
Right.
but we figured out, looking at the sun and the way we were going, we were crossing the Atlantic.
Right.
So we went through Gibraltar and into Marseille.
Now, was that were you on a big troop ship or an old liner, or what was it?
Well, it was a troop ship, but actually it was a liner from the North American trade before World War
Oh, yeah.
II started, and it was the George Washington.
Oh,
They
sure.
renamed it as a troop ship, was the Mount Vernon.
Yeah.
So anyway, we landed at Marseille and went up the Rhone Valley and to northeastern France and 7th Army.
7th Army.
Mhm.
Now, who was the commander of the 7th Army?
You get me now. Patch, I think, was
Patch was.
Patch
General
was the commander
Patch.
of 7th Army.
He had quite a reputation, didn't he?
He was a first-class soldier all the
Yes,
way along
sir.
the line. He set a fine example for
You
him.
bet. And you know, with a name like that, General Patch, you know, it just had a ring to it, didn't it?
Yeah. Well, we had Patch was the commander. 3rd Army was on our left, Patton,
Mm-hmm.
and ball started. They hit between the two armies, so we were turned north to cover the gap.
Where did you get your first combat experience?
At a French town right on the German-French border. Right now it escapes me. But
Strasbourg or
we were
something?
right just short of the Siegfried line.
Mm-hmm.
And
Tell
2
us.
months later we crossed the river and attacked the Siegfried line and went through it.
Oh, you went through the Siegfried line, yeah. Well, tell us about your feelings in combat for the first time and hearing the enemy fire and so forth. How did that affect you?
Well, last day or so traveling north, coming in as a replacement division, you heard the cannon. You knew that we weren't on a practice. They were shooting at people.
They were
We
really.
were some of the people. So we provided a few additional cannon. I was an artilleryman. And we provided a few additional rounds to shoot the other way.
Right. Now,
And-
you were a company commander?
No, I was a forward observer. I was with the Infantry Battalion.
I see.
And I helped control the artillery fire in support of the Infantry Battalion
Gotcha.
at the time.
Right. What kind of armament did you have? What were you shooting?
We had 105s, which was the
105?
standard piece, yeah.
Big
They
guns.
were new at that time. We'd been using up until the war started. We were using French 75s, and 105 was a little heavier weapon, shoot a little farther,
Right.
and it was almost a howitzer, and we could shoot in hilly country and so on. A little better than the French 75, which are a gun.
Right. How did you compare the American armament with the enemy? The Nazis, the Germans, had some very effective weapons.
Well, the Germans have been at war several years, and they obviously did a very good job. And we knew that, and we've been trained about some of the things that they did, and we did what we were told, and
Sure,
eventually came out all right.
absolutely.
But it was first-class soldiers and first-class soldiers
Yeah.
tangling.
Did you capture German soldiers and make prisoners of them or anything like that?
Well, you pick up a few in the course of business here and there, but
Mm-hmm.
later on, when the German army began to collapse, we were in northern Bavaria, and we had a lot of prisoners at that time. Big problem was what to do with them.
Yeah,
Yeah, because you still had to be control of them and feed them and
Yes.
house them and so on.
Yeah, well, I didn't have that kind of experience, but I've read about it, and all of a sudden, as you say, toward the end of the war, and they were surrendering in huge numbers.
Well, there was fight there for some months, and all of a sudden, as the war began to wind down, all of a sudden we ended up with a lot of prisoners,
Yes,
and they'd done a good job. And you respected the other people.
yes,
As one of my soldiers said one time, they're doing the same thing for their country we're doing for ours.
I know.
So I think the soldiers had a lot of respect for each other, despite the fact that there was a lot of hatred back and forth among the
Yes.
people.
Of course. Well, the Germans, of course, we've read about it, that they were very leery of the advance of the Soviets from the east coming into Germany too, and weren't they sort of wary? They were more leaning toward the Allies as they surrendered rather than getting caught by the Russians.
Well, that gets at a level that I wasn't at this particular time.
I
But
see.
I've heard stories to that effect that they were doing their best to block the Russians.
Right.
And if they, so long as they were going under, they'd rather be captured or occupied by the British and Americans than the Russian.
That's right.
But I wasn't in on those decisions.
But how about air power over there? What did you experience from our Air Force and its effectiveness?
Well, air power divided too. You had the bombing, the deep runs into Germany and bomb the cities. And it's hard to realize how a big city would be just obliterated by 1,000 airplanes, each dropping a couple of tons of bombs. And I don't know how the Germans hung on as long as they did.
Yeah.
And they also had close support aircraft to help support the infantry and cavalry moving forward.
Right.
And there's two different types, and both of them did well. We first-class setup as far as our Air Force was concerned.
Yes,
Or
I
Air
should
Corps
s-
at that time, Army Air Corps.
I should say. As you progressed up the Rhone through into Germany, did you have contact with civilians, German civilians, in the different towns and so forth?
Well, I didn't have much contact. We got into Germany, but I didn't have much contact with them until after the war was over. I stayed in Germany after the war on occupation. And at that time, we, in effect, were the government because
Yes.
the Nazis were forbidden to hold any particular jobs
Right.
in it. And our soldiers, in effect, were the policemen and judge and jury of all
Right.
that went on in the various German towns where we were stationed.
Where were you stationed at that time when you were administrating?
I ended up in Weingen, Germany, which is a suburb of Stuttgart.
Oh, yes.
And Stuttgart reminds you a lot of Cincinnati. It's a river town, a few hills above it. Stuttgart was a suburban area.
Beautiful city.
Oh yeah, fascinating. And we got along well in spite of the differences during the war. I think things went pretty well in and around that town.
Now, did you have any responsibility? Did the Americans have any responsibility in cleaning up the city, or was that strictly on the civilians?
No, this was strictly a civilian job. The
Yeah.
Germans were pretty well organized to go in and fix up the buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't interfere with that. What government we did have there sort of helped the Germans as far as cleaning it up and getting ready. Because when the war ended, we had 60 million people to house and feed.
Wow.
And that's quite a problem in itself, and a completely different one. But the Army had it, and they did it.
Absolutely. Well, that is a great story that so many people today don't understand or know anything about, And of course, we had what we call the Marshall Plan, and that went into effect to help rebuild the country that we had just defeated.
That's right.
And you had a very important part in that.
Well, we were instrumental in settling things down and trying as best we could to get back to the pre-war.
Right.
But
Now, were you
it's
there?
hard to say the terrific impact that war had on the Germans. They paid for the price
Oh, yes.
because
Terrible.
mile after mile, you see a picture of a bathtub or something hanging on a broken wall. But what happened was amazing. You go into town and you have mile after mile of nothing but rubble,
Yes.
burned out cities. And it's hard to recall
Yes, I
just
should
exactly
say.
what was going on.
Yeah, heart-rending to see something like that, and something to which we Americans were never subject to. We've been very fortunate.
Well, the pilots had priority too. If some of them got shot down and they parachuted in,
Yeah,
the best people to be captured by would be the foreign military. The second best people would be the military police and firemen who were out doing a job. And the last people you want to be captured by were the women in the towns whose nests had been blown up by these bombers.
Right.
They were quite vicious in their feelings toward the people who were doing the bombing.
I'm sure. Well,
Yeah.
understandable, of course, but at the same time, they were they were under the heel of a government.
The army that was causing us a lot of trouble.
Right, absolutely, and they were under the heel of a government that was almost right up to the bitter end, still defiant, wasn't it?
Oh yeah.
Hitler and so forth and so on. Now, were you there at the time of the Nuremberg trials?
Yes. I got a chance to go in and hear some of the Nuremberg
Oh,
trials.
you did?
I was at that time on a Corps assignment, which became headquarters for the constabulary forces, and I was out checking on various units that we were adding to the constabulary and see how they were getting mixed in.
Mm-hmm.
And I happened to be near in Nuremberg, and I went up and they had the trials in German and English, and you could put on whatever, or French and so on. You could put on the earphones and listen to the trial as it was progressing.
Wow.
And I had a chance to do that.
So you sat in the courtroom?
I heard some of it. I didn't get there long. I just took an afternoon off and listened a couple of hours.
Sure.
Then I went out traveling again.
Right. Well, that was a bit of history for you to experience too, wasn't it? To
Oh yeah.
see and hear and see some of those people on
Here's
trial.
the questions, of course, I was hearing a translator repeat what was being said by the witness, but you could follow it quite well.
Did you ever meet a man here in town by the name of Dolibois?
I'm sorry?
Dolibois, Dolibois. He was a professor at Miami University after the war.
I did not know him at the time, but I since met him, and he's a very interesting man to talk to. I
Indeed.
enjoyed his talk,
Yes,
because he had a first-class position on the whole setup,
right.
and he gave a very accurate, very good account of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, he's been a speaker at our Veterans Day program here at the library.
Well, if he's talking someplace, I'll be glad to come and listen to it.
Well, good. Well, we'll talk about that afterwards. But we want to get more of your feelings about as you were. I want to go back into your combat era again. Do you have any stories, any personal stories that you remember about certain individuals, good friends, comrades, anything like that?
Well, I was with the Infantry Battalion, and we had a commander there who had watched the Japanese come out in the Pacific before he was reassigned. He
Oh,
came over to us,
wow.
and he was a tremendous man, and he had an S3, an operations man on his staff.
I beg your pardon?
He had an operations man on his staff,
Oh,
Bob Strauss. So Strauss and the battalion commander and I sort of formed a little triumvirate, and we had one man in charge, but the other spoke for him. In other words, we got along so well together that one spelled the other. We went to the war like that. It was a terrific experience with those two people.
oh, I should say those things.
I had the artillery fire and worked on the battalion fire support
Mhm.
plans and so on. And the other two, of course, had come up through the infantry ranks. And
Right. Now, when you went overseas, what was your rank?
I was a captain.
You were a captain,
Yeah.
and then you got a major, and then lieutenant colonel,
And eventually colonel, yeah.
and
But
eventually
they came
colonel.
years later. I was a major when the war was over. I went to Panama later on and got promoted to lieutenant colonel.
Well,
And then,
that's
I
just.
ended up in Korea and promoted to colonel there.
Oh, you went to Korea?
Yeah.
My goodness sakes! What a, what an experience that must have been. Well, now again, your association with your comrades in arms, as I can see through your personality and everything, you're a very compassionate person and of course highly educated. You must have been, I would think you were very highly regarded by your men.
Well, I hope so. I had some good soldiers. We went through a lot together.
Of course.
And you get to know them an awful lot when you're living with them and eating with them and fighting with them, and they're writing letters about you and what they were doing.
Sure.
And so I had some first-class soldiers who did a terrific job.
Sure you did.
And I thought the world of them.
Now,
and all the time you had them in combat,
oh
you
my
feel like
goodness.
your brothers being shot at.
I should say, you know, we look back on 60 years plus when we were serving in those. I was in the ocean area of the South Pacific all the time I was in the Navy, so quite different from yours, and I'm just fascinated by your experience and your the things that you saw and did. Now, how long were you in Germany until you were brought back to the States?
Well, the war ended, what, 45?
45.
And I came home in July of 47.
47.
Yeah. There are a couple of things. I got married in 1942 when I was with the 1st Special Service Force.
Oh, you were.
And so when I went to Europe, my wife was pregnant, so I had a little girl, and I'd never met her until I came home. She was 17 months old.
Oh.
You talk about experiences. I took her to Germany and my wife on occupation duty. So we had German help. And this little 1.5-year-old girl learned to speak English and German at the same time. And what always struck me is she spoke German to the help and English to her mother and father. I thought that was a pretty good deal.
I should say so. One of you? That was you. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's just
Well,
wonderful.
she doesn't know German anymore. But her father was German and was born down the West End here in Cincinnati, to a doctor. And he didn't speak English till he started school. So
Really?
after he started school and learned English, he spoke German. In World War I, he was a translator for an American company on
my.
occupation duty on the Rhine.
Oh.
So here I was a generation later
Yeah.
on the Rhine. But the fact remains, I think he had a ball with a granddaughter who could speak German.
Oh, I should say so.
I don't know what it had to do with the war.
That's a real special thing,
Yeah,
I
but
should say.
it happened. But she was over there. You talk about moving. I came back, had a son born in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one was born in Panama. The last one was born in upstate New York.
I'll be darned. Goodness sake.
So
So you
the
had
whole
you had
point is, the military get a lot of credit for doing all these things. That's fine. But the people who get the credit should be the wives of these military
Oh,
people who
yes.
are raising families,
Oh, yeah.
doing things for first one and another around the world at the same time. And
I should say.
without the women in support, I don't think we do a very good job.
Absolutely right. You talk about that and how those great women were uprooted, you know, to
They
move
were
with.
uprooted like everybody else.
Absolutely. It
And,
was a
Our wife
tremendous.
did a terrific job.
A tremendous contribution to our nation. They were great mothers and supporters, all at the same time. Now, how long? Okay, so you're back in Oklahoma, Sanborn, Oklahoma. You
Yeah, I was
said.
on there.
And what was that base?
It's near Lawton, Oklahoma, not too far from Oklahoma.
Oh,
City.
near Fort Lawton.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I was on the staff of the artillery school there for
Okay.
3 years, yeah.
So you were in artillery all the way through, right?
I was in artillery, but the artillery is in close support of the infantry, so I was with them.
Of course.
If you don't know what the infantry is doing, you're not doing your job.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, the infantry relied on the artillery so much for support and protection.
Yeah.
The combination of just,
Awful high percentage of casualties come as a result of artillery fire.
yeah. Did you suffer a lot of casualties over there?
Well, there were 37 people in the unit I went overseas with. At the end of the war, there were 3 left, and 2 of us had Purple Hearts. Now, they weren't all killed. People were wounded. Other
Yeah.
people came and took their place.
Transferred, yeah.
So I go to veterans organization meetings and so on, reunions, and I see a lot of these people who were wounded and carted off, and they're still alive and doing
Yeah.
a good job.
Right.
So the casualty rate was quite high in the work we were doing, particularly
Yes.
going through fortified positions like the Berlin Wall, the Western Wall, or the
Western
Siegfried
Wall.
Line.
Yeah, that Siegfried line. That was desperate.
It was well designed.
Desperate
It did
area,
its job.
I should say.
Yeah.
So, when did you finally get into Berlin?
I came home before I ever got into Berlin.
Oh, I see.
And it was after I retired that I took a trip to Europe, and we hit the North countries in Norway and Sweden, and then a trip on over into Berlin.
So you've traveled broadly since the war,
Oh yes,
I should say. That's wonderful.
traveled on orders, and then traveled with home.
On your own. I should say.
But it was, I've seen a lot of this country. I'm interested in history, and I like to see them.
Absolutely.
And we've got some wonderful people from all these various countries.
Well, I imagine you have.
Yeah.
And speaking of something like that, so many of our fellow veterans today, a lot of them have been out of touch, so to speak. Do you go to reunions and so forth?
I did for a good many years. The last few years, I have not gone to them too many.
I see.
My wife hasn't been in good health, and I'm not as young as I used to be. But
I know. Tell me about it.
anyway, no, it's still, I still hear from them. I get reports from them, and
Good.
do accept correspondence with them.
That's wonderful.
Because you're at a big job, and your life's at risk, and you're pretty close to these people.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to forget them when the war's over. You forget other people maybe, but not the people
That's
you fought
right.
with.
Well, it is. You're exactly right. And you hit on a point there that it was so special. It was something that so many people have not had the experience of and enjoying, really. And as we look back on it, they were difficult times, but they were great times at the same,
They were. But
because of the people we were
nice
with.
to go back, not only how you felt about things, but see how they felt about things.
Yes.
All the way out them.
Well, I can understand how you feel about it, particularly as a historian. You can relate to both sides very easily and understand people because of the experience you've had.
Well, yeah, it's fun to go back over it, and it's fun to talk to people who fought for Poland, who did that. The French had a very difficult time
Yes.
being occupied like they did,
Terrible.
and the Italians had a rough time.
Yeah.
And since then, I've taught at American schools like at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, Command General Staff School. We had officers in there from both sides.
Oh, yes.
And they were schooled in American, with the American officers in American schools.
Mhm.
It was interesting to get their side of the picture at the time you were telling your side.
Right, that's very important. Well, you know, Colonel, as you point out, it's so important to have opposing views and to be able to understand, and that's why we're still the greatest nation in the world. One of the reasons.
Well, thank you. But I had a lot of brothers.
I know. But with great leaders such as you and sensitive people, we've all known some people that were in command positions that were not particularly, some of them were not particularly what you'd like to follow.
Well, the thing is, there's one institution in the United States that can declare war, that's Congress. When they declare war, we're at war, and I think the armed forces deserve all the support you give them
Absolutely.
during that time.
You're exactly
And
right.
forget your own personal politics. The soldiers are out there fighting for their country.
Absolutely.
You do something for them, you help them out.
And you know, that was one of the great things about our nation in that period of time. Not only our armed forces, but the people at home who worked in the factories and supported.
It was one thing.
Absolutely.
I mean, the political leadership kept everybody tuned to the war, and everybody got the shoulder to the wheel, so to speak.
Yeah.
And if it hadn't been for that, the war wouldn't have ended like it did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what you mentioned before about the people of those nations in Europe that suffered so badly, France and Germany and Italy and Britain, and the spirit that they acquired in wartime, which is so unusual, it's so anathema to most people. You have pointed that out so well. When you returned to the States, then now the Korean War started in 1950. What was your outlook at that time?
Well, I had been on the teaching at the command at the artillery school in Fort Sill, and I wanted to go to Hawaii because I had a brother out that way, and he talked a lot about it. So I asked for Hawaii and ended up in Panama. So at the time that war started, I was on leave traveling to Panama.
Oh, really?
So I got on a ship and we ended up in Panama. And that was the last ship to go to Panama. Every ship after that headed to the west,
all the way
Far
across.
East, and took part in the Korean War. And I got to Korea later on. The war was almost over when I got there. We had some infighting, but the war itself had quieted down. But during the Korean War, I spent most of the time on guard in the Panama Canal, the canal zone, Panama.
Right, and that was very, very, very important, of course, because that was such a sensitive...
I have one souvenir here from Panama. She started in Panama when she was born in New York, but that's the way it is in the Army.
We're getting mixed signals here. So how long were you in Panama?
How long was I there? 3 years.
3 years, wow.
Yeah. We are, of course, in the jungle there fighting.
And the tropics.
We had a lot to do with the Central American countries. And I went to U.S. Army South at Fort Amador, and we had control of the missions in South America.
Oh,
So I had a good look at South America and Central America all the way through. Mm-hmm. And left there and went back to Syracuse and got a controller degree and got mixed up in the controller business, Army budgets and so on.
I see.
So from then on, went to Pentagon.
And you were at the Pentagon for how long?
Well, I spent 2 different tours up there, 7 years all told.
Really?
I
Wow.
spent 1 year with the controller, 3 years with the Army Chief of Staff's office. And after finishing a tour in Korea, I went back to the Joint Chiefs and was there for 3 years.
Did you serve any time in occupation in the Far East? Like
Well, I
in
spent a
Japan
year-
or anything?
Spent a year in Korea.
In Korea?
It was basically occupation. We had some fighting, but not
Right.
a whole lot. Little infighting, which shouldn't have taken place, but some of it did.
So where were you stationed in Korea? In Pyongyang, or were you in Seoul, or where were you?
I was with the 1st Cavalry Division on the 38th parallel
Oh, you
for
were?
6 months.
Wow.
And then I went back to Seoul, was in 8th Army Headquarters, the United Nations Command.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there in the Chief of Staff office.
Wow.
So I got a look at the whole peninsula.
I should say.
Yeah.
Now, were you a colonel by that time?
I was a colonel then,
Full
yes.
colonel.
I was lieutenant colonel with the first cab, and I got
Yeah.
promoted to colonel. They found a spot for me up in Chief Staff's office.
So you got your bird colonel
I
up there.
got 2 looks at the country. One from the bottom up, the other top down.
I should say so. Well, that's just fascinating. Have you written your memoirs or anything like that?
No. I got a couple of people here do that for me.
How about that? There's a job for you. Well, you know, aside from this interview, you can talk to a tape recorder sometime, you know, and just the wonderful way you speak and respond to questions and so forth.
Well, if I can help people, that's
You
fine.
could-
I mean, that's what you're doing. I think a lot of people forget, but when you're an officer in the Army, you're basically a teacher. You're
Exactly.
teaching all the time
Yes.
about how to do this and how to do that.
Yes.
And so it ties in pretty well.
Well, I should say so. It's wonderful to hear you express yourself so well. And now, coming back after Korea, was that when you were sent to the Pentagon?
I came back from Korea. I was with the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
JCS.
And there they were interested not only what happened in Korea, but what happened in various hotspots around the world.
Right.
And there are a lot of sides to these questions.
Well, you know, that's a very interesting point you bring up, hotspots around the world. So many people don't realize, you know, I read recently that actually there's something like almost 50 wars going on in parts of the world. And, you know, we think today of Iraq and Afghanistan.
Somebody wrote a history, I don't know exactly what it was. They came out, there was an average of 3 wars going on in the world. It's any given year
Absolutely.
going on. And
Yeah.
unfortunate, but
I
it's
know.
happened. I
Yeah,
wish there were
it's-
a lot of ways to end wars through, like consultation, but somehow or other if the consultations don't work, you end up in a war. So you have to be ready, and you have to,
Have to be
it's
ready.
a dangerous business to be in. and
Absolutely.
You have to know what you're doing and know how to use the people you have.
Absolutely. And then, as you so capably have pointed out, that's why we're still the great American Republic. I like to call it a republic.
Well,
And
it got that way because the people had to work for it. It didn't come for free.
that's right. That's right. Freedom is not free. It comes at a great price, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Now, when you were at the Pentagon, you know, I think of the Pentagon as that massive place across the river there in Virginia, and they talk about the rings of the Pentagon, the 5 sides and an outer ring and then inner rings. Where was your headquarters?
Well, I was in the Chief Staff's office there. Well, one tour, and another tour with the Joint Chiefs. And the building does a great job. And a large part of the Pentagon is in the Pentagon, but we also have units outside the Pentagon doing Pentagon work.
Of course.
That's how big the whole thing is.
Of course.
And you have to negotiate your thing on across the battlefield, but you have to be able to negotiate the Washington traffic when you go to work in the morning. It's terrific, coming out of Virginia. So
The
a lot of people
Beltway
go
and
to
all
Virginia.
that sort of thing.
But no, it was a great experience up there. And Pentagon, whether you like it or dislike it, is quite a building.
Well, it must be. Now, when you lived there, and you had your family there with you?
Oh yeah,
And
whenever I could, they were with me.
right. Now, did you live on a base, or did you live in the city,
No,
or what?
We lived in separate housing. You had to get your housing separate.
I see.
And I lived over in northern Virginia.
But it was a military housing arrangement, right?
No, I lived about 2 miles from the major post there.
Okay.
And we go into the post and go to church and have meals on Sunday. That was my contact with the post, Fort Myer.
I see.
But basically, it was from my house to the Pentagon and
Sure.
back to the house again. No, we didn't have military housing.
But you had, and the family, of course, had the post-exchange
Family.
ability and so forth?
Well, the family went to the local schools, local churches,
Mm-hmm.
local Girl Scout troops and whatnot.
All that sort of thing.
And so you mix in with the people there. The military was spread out to the whole population there.
Right.
It wasn't like living on a post in military housing.
Who were you serving under while you were there at the Pentagon? Who was your chief? You remember? General somebody?
I have to go back and think that one over. But I served under 3 different joint
You did?
chairmen there, yes.
So now we're talking about the 1950s when you were at the Pentagon?
I went back to the Pentagon in 54.
54.
I was there 54 to 58, yeah.
54 to 58.
Yeah.
Well, that was very crucial times, and of course that was building up to what we call the Cold War.
It was right in the middle of it.
Right.
through it.
What's your
You
mind?
asked me about Vietnam. We had lots to do with Vietnam, but I never fought there.
I see. I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were still in the military at the very beginning of the Vietnam when we sent our.
I retired in 1970.
Wow.
I went in 39, retired in 70.
Right. Right. Dealing with the politicians now. Give us some background or some idea or feelings about your experience with politicians.
It's mixed. It's mixed. Actually, when I sat there in the Chief Staff Office, some congressmen wanted to, or a congressional committee wanted to hear, hey, we're working for them.
Yeah.
And they came over and asked questions, and I was involved in testifying before
You
some
had
of
to
them.
you had to go to
If
Congress.
you had a particular project and they wanted to know something about it, they called you in and talked to you.
Sure. Sure.
And it wasn't a regular business, don't get me wrong,
No.
but on several occasions, their committees came over, or people from their committees came in and talked to us, and we gave them the best answers we could and let it go.
Of course.
I mean, after all, they vote.
Well, they had
should
to.
know what's going on.
Sure, they were.
And basically, my idea of the congressman is they're a lot better people than most Americans give them credit for being.
Well, there are a few of them that we don't think too
Few of
high.
them, yeah, there are few exceptions. There are exceptions in any rule, any given situation.
That's right. That's so
The
right.
exceptions get more publicity to the guys who are doing a very good job.
Yes. Well, the thing about speaking with you is that I don't think that I've had the opportunity to speak to someone who's had such broad, in-depth experiences you have. And, going back over your military career, do you have any particular instances that stand out in your mind? You've talked about some of them already, but anything else that stands out in your memory that you'd like your family and your friends to know about?
I'd have to take a little time to gather my thoughts together on this. There were lots of things going on, lots of things happened, and whatever happens, you're dealing with people.
I know.
And you have to have trained people
Yeah.
to step in and take charge and do something.
Right, exactly.
And, it takes a little effort. It takes a group of people, and you have to work together on it.
Well, it's so obvious from your method of speaking and so forth and your knowledge that you were a true leader and had a tremendous influence on a lot of people. And I just wondered, have you heard from any of your underlings over the years? Hey, Colonel, I remember this, I remember that. Remember when we were together at so-and-so?
Well, the Army is a pretty good-sized organization, but you move around in it, and you learn to know. It's like working for any big business. You learn to know people. You've gone to school with them, you served with them various places, and you build a lot on what other people, your friends, tell you their experiences.
You
and
learn
you
from
tell
them,
yours,
don't you? Sure.
and so on. So you all work together on this. It's
Right.
an organized group effort.
Absolutely.
And it's a great organization. And of course, we work not only with the Army, you work with the Air Force and the Navy, Marines, and they're fine organizations.
I should
They're
say,
good people to work with.
yeah.
I mean, Marines and Air Force go to our schools, and our people go to their schools, and you work on the staff down there, the Joint Chiefs staff. My immediate boss was a Lieutenant General of the Air Force,
Right.
and you get to know all these people, and they do a good job. And I hope to stay good people, because we need them.
Your experience with the JCS over the years, did you have opportunities to go, well, for example, the Navy War College up in Rhode Island or anything like that?
Well, people go to the Navy War College. I didn't.
I see.
I went to the Army schools. But no, you have that opportunity.
You have those
Select
cooperations, yeah.
and you work a problem in an Army school. You have Air Force and Navy people there
Right.
to add to their part or give
Sure.
you their opinions on what should be done and so on.
Well, you know, we in the Navy always like to say we're the first line of defense, you know. And without the Navy, the Army can't get there and so forth, you know. So we have,
Well, there's a lot of truth in that. You have to work together.
that's right, you have to work together.
Yeah, and my association with the Navy is they've done a first-class job on everything I've worked with them on.
Right.
And so I have no complaints about them at all.
Well, that's good. You're very diplomatic. You should have gone into the Foreign Service Corps as well.
I'm not so sure. I wasn't there part-time.
I'm sure you were. And you exerted a lot of influence diplomatically and as well as militarily and so forth. And it's just fascinating to hear your stories. And I wish we could do another hour after you had thought a little bit more about some of your stories and so forth. But this has been a tremendous opportunity to get you on tape. And I know that your family and your friends are going to appreciate hearing you and seeing you in
I
action.
played my family's Army too.
Their Army
They've
too.
grown up with it, yeah.
Right. Well, they are, and of course your kids, you call them Army brats, I guess, you know,
Oh, they went to school with Army kids. and so
moving
on.
here and there and everywhere.
Oh, one of the interesting things,
Good.
I was on a school board at Fort Leavenworth, and we could hire most any teachers in Kansas we wanted because those teachers loved to talk to a group where some of the people in the class had already been to these places they were talking about.
Right,
They knew a lot of them,
right.
and most of the kids in the service are cared for pretty well, and they do their work. So number one, they were interested in school, and number two, you had experiences from various parts of the world right in the classroom as you were teaching.
Very
the teachers loved
rich.
it.
Very rich, I
Yeah.
should say. Plus the fact that the kids got some of that military discipline in them early on through their families and having to make adjustments, you know, and maybe live a little differently from the normal civilian.
Well, I don't know. They were my kids.
And you're darn proud of them.
Yeah, they did a great job. I've been very fortunate.
I should say so. Well, that certainly, I'm sure that your friends around the world.
Oh, my wife, as I said earlier, did a great job too.
Oh yes, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
And of course, you have friends all around the world that admire and respect you and your family, and I think that's just terrific. Are you fairly active today in Veterans Affairs or anything like that?
I was for a long time. Recently, I haven't been, no. But I recommend people stay active because they've been through the mill, so to speak.
Right.
And I got a lot of ideas, and I think they should be able to express their ideas to the rest of the people around here.
Absolutely.
What's going on?
Well, you know, our wonderful public library here, when this building was built, it it's a memorial to the veterans of Hamilton County. Did you know that?
I'd heard that
Yeah.
some years back, one Memorial Day, I guess. I gave a talk downstairs to a group.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was working, I think I was at the courthouse at the time. But I came down and gave a talk, and it worked out very well.
Good for you.
Very well received. But I heard at that time that the library here in Hamilton County was associated with the
Well,
preparedness.
I want to make sure, I hope you're available on the 11th of November, Veterans Day, and be sure and get him down here, 10:45. It's Tuesday this year, the 11th of November. And for 54 years, we've been having these wonderful, wonderful Veterans Day programs here.
It's a good one.
They're outstanding. We always have a veteran speaker, and we've had, they have a patriotic music and dedication of memorial things. And so it's very, very important. And we'll alert the library to Colonel Dooley so that he can have a seat up front and see and hear everything very well. We'll get 400 people down there in the atrium. People come early and they stand around the walls and big crowd. And it is wonderful because this library is dedicated to the veterans.
Good.
And so I want to impress this upon you and your family to be sure and be here on Veterans Day, because it'll be impressive to you and it'll be an opportunity for us to honor you also.
Thank you.
And that's very, very important, and we want to be sure that we have that opportunity to honor you
In general.
and bring all your family and all. You have grandchildren here in town?
I have grandchildren, I have great-grandchildren.
And great-grandchildren?
Yeah.
Well, you're doing better than I am. That's wonderful. I've got grandchildren, but I haven't got the next generation yet.
They're a great group.
So let's see now. You were born in 1917, so you're 91?
91, going closer to 92.
My goodness, that is just amazing. That's just wonderful.
And I hope we don't have any more wars.
No more wars. No more.
If we have to have them, we have to have them, but I hope we don't have them.
Yeah, well, you know, and that's something that it's a constant. As long, I'm sorry to say it, but you know, as long as man exists, there are going to be wars.
Yeah.
We love to talk about
Unfortunately.
peace, you know, and peace and peace and peace, but there's always somebody that's going to start something.
Mhm.
Want something that you have or that somebody else has, you know. And did you have any experience in the Middle East?
No,
No.
other than the administrative staff, you know, sending people over there and
Yes.
talking about people and what
Right.
their mission was, and what they were to do and not to
Right.
do. But I've traveled a little bit over there
I'm sure you
in the
have.
Middle East, but
Yeah.
I've never had any, and I certainly got a lot about the history of
Yes.
warfare in the Middle
Oh,
East,
yeah. Yeah.
but I have not partaken of any of it.
Well, that's another thing that we do here at the library, and that is to honor our military people who are currently serving, you know,
That's right.
and
I think they should be.
remembering
And
them.
it's real rough when you're walking through a town, you don't know who's friend and who isn't,
That's right.
or who might take a crack at you and
Exactly.
who might not.
Exactly right. Well, Colonel Dooley, it's just been an honor for me to not only to speak with you and hear your story, but to get to meet you as a person, and have had the charming opportunity to meet your daughter before through the Cincinnati Ballet connection here. But it's been a great honor, sir.
Well,
We thank you for your
very much. It's
time.
been a pleasure talking to you.
Well, God bless,
And,
and I'll look forward to seeing you here on the 11th of November.
Okay, fine.
We'll get you
Thank you very much.